Commemorating the release of Fontaine last month was the release of Lyney as the first playable 5-star character of Genshin 4.0, as well as the first legitimate pyro character in Genshin, what with how much of an abject failure Dio was in the last version. Upon taking a look at his talents, it was made very clear right from the start that he was meant to be played in a certain way, one that the player base has played around with in the past as a bit of a niche if not gimmick strategy, only this time it was explicitly stated in not only his moveset, but the signature weapon accompanying him, and that had me both curious and excited. Recently I made videos voicing my thoughts and criticisms on how Genshin's combat has evolved over time to push a certain win condition, causing other strategies and the units that follow them to be viewed less favorably, and while they've toyed with the idea of rogue team compositions and playstyles, this is the first time I've seen them openly come out with it. So in today's video, I want to discuss how I believe Lyney's design might allow for a big shift in the game's prioritization of elements and potentially call into question if mono-elemental teams can finally be viable after theorizing it for so long. Not that far back, I made a video discussing the viability of hypercarries as well as a video on whether elements were too focused on damage, pressuring us to prioritize a team that can make use of them whether we wanted to or not. Both videos were made right before the release of Fontaine, so I was pleasantly surprised to find out what Lyney's kit was all about, since optimistically speaking, this could be exactly the kind of direction I was hoping MiHoYo would take to address the challenges I raised in both videos. I'm guessing by now most of you know what Lyney's premise is, but for those who don't, he's the first featured 5-star character of Fontaine and to pyro bow user. While that may seem a bit redundant seeing as how we already have Yoimiya, the key distinction between her and Lyney is that Yoimiya focuses on normal attacks while Lyney is more of a charged attacker, similarly to Ganyu. On top of that, he's part of the exclusive support category. I say support, he's an on-field DPS, but I was referring to the aspect of augmenting his own element rather than synergizing with others. Another key aspect is that he's a self-damaging character and that he sacrifices his own health like how Hu Tao does to power his own abilities. Interestingly, when he fires a charge 2 level aim shot, it summons a decoy bomb on arrival, so he basically has Amber's elemental skill attached to his auto attack, which has to be the biggest slap in the face to Amber mains I have ever seen. To add insult to injury, his elemental skill can explode the decoy right after summoning it as opposed to Amber needing to specifically aim a charge shot at Baron Bunny to set it off. Speaking of his skill, prop surplus stacks that you racked up via level 2 aim shot and elemental burst increase the damage dealt by the attack and heals him for a significant amount, making him self-sustaining to an extent, which is a nice quality of life adjustment, although you still need Bennett if you want to max out DPS and survivability. Now onto the part of his kit that is actually relevant to the video, his passive talent, Conclusive Ovation. The damage Lyney deals to his opponents affected by pyro receive the following buffs. First, he deals 60% more damage to them by default, on its own a very strong boost. Additionally, each pyro character in your party other than him will increase that damage by an extra 20% up to a total cap of 100, which means you'll max out by using him and 2 other pyro characters. This makes him the first pyro unit in Genshin to have a mono-elemental connotation to his gameplay. Up until this point, the only characters whose base talents entail having specific elements in your party are Nilou and Goro, with Nilou being a hybrid between Hydro and Dendro and Goro being Geo, although in Nilou's case it's more of a restriction than a buff, meaning Lyney is the first character since Goro, and I suppose Ito with Constellation too, to heavily imply a certain type of elemental team to be played. Technically it's not mono element since you're allowed to have a 4th party slot that isn't pyro, but for most players' definitions, having at least 3 members of the same element is considered mono-elemental since most conventional teams have only 2 of the same element at most. This may be seen as a more trivial aspect of Lyney's kit compared to Goro, who quite literally is Geo or bust, but I noticed people were bringing it up in regards to the possibility of mono-elemental teams, especially because it's pyro. On top of that, his signature weapon bears the same property as well. First Grade Magic's weapon passive increases charge attack damage. Also, for every party member with the same elemental type as a wielder, including the wielder themselves, you gain bonus attack up to a cap of 3 members, and for every party member with a different elemental type from the wielder, you gain bonus movement speed instead. 2 things I want to point out. First, I like how it doesn't specify what element it has to be in order to receive the effects. It just has to be whatever element the wielder is, which opens up the door for other aim shot bow users to capitalize on it. And there just so happens to be another charge level 2 aim shot main DPS unit who enjoys having party members of the same element on their team, Ganyu. This is a very welcome quality of life feature that is kind of unusual for Genshin. A problem I had with weapons for a while was that a large number of them are highly specific to the character they accompany. Not saying you can't use them for others, but the way they're designed gives off the impression you're not getting full use out of them on other units besides the intended one. Second, First Grade Magic gives you margin for error, in that it only requires you to have 3 of the 4 party slots to be the same element, not all 4. Additionally, it still offers benefit to having someone else, albeit not really practical for combat, the bonus movement speed buff. This means you can still take advantage of supports of a different element without compromising the full effectiveness of this bow. Its conditions are lenient enough for it to work on any bow user, not just him. What I like about Lyney and his signature weapon is that they encourage a direction for you to take for your party without outright eliminating room for personal freedom. I remember back when Nulu came out, people complained about her passive talent forcing you into just Hydro or Dendro units, stripping you of the ability to take advantage of whatever benefits Animo, Pyro, Cryo, Geo, and Electro have or could have in the future. Granted, that's kind of a non-issue considering Hydro and Dendro are two of the best elements in the game and the payoff being more than worth it, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't wish I could throw Kazuha or Sucrose into that team. Lyney, on the other hand, does give you the option to throw in other units, which is the perfect way to encourage players to try out mono-elemental teams. An aspect of Genshin's combat that I do enjoy is that each element follows a theme represented by its characters, making it so that no singular one does everything for you. This in tandem with elemental reactions was obviously to incentivize players mixing and matching elements together to get the best of every world. But one of the side effects of this is that it made mono-elemental teams feel pretty bad to use in comparison despite being the only viable option for some characters because you couldn't make full use of benefits from other elements. In Goro's case, he also caps out at 3, letting you flex a 4th character, but the inherent issues with Geo make it so you don't get much benefit from other elements from a universal standpoint. For example, Kazuha is worthless for Mono Geo because he can't even get you Crystallize, and Crystallize is terrible anyway. The other character known for Mono Element is Klee, another Pyro character whose core team consists of herself, Kazuha, Bennett, and Xiangling for 3 Pyro, 1 Animo. If we're splitting hairs, nothing in Klee's kit expressly states having more Pyro units on her team, it's just coincidentally her playstyle and circumstances happen to make Mono Pyro the most efficient course of action for her. The only downside is that Klee is, how do I say this without getting cancelled? She's okay. Not bad, not great. The way she was designed suggests that she's better suited for co-op, but regardless, she's proof of concept of players trying out mono-elemental teams. Lyney is Genshin's first mono-element venture outside of Geo, which has me wondering if MiHoYo is thinking about doing this for other elements too. While Pyro may not be the most reaction-agnostic element compared to Hydro or Electro, it sure as hell makes use of them way more than Geo. This means we can finally see how well mono-elemental teams can stack against traditional elemental teams on the same level playing field, although Lyney isn't quite as free range as he could be. With how his Ascension passive is worded, the target has to be actively affected by Pyro for him to deal more damage to them, essentially preventing you from using Vaporize or Melt as that would clear the Pyro status on them and replace it with Hydro or Cryo, meaning your only flex element options are basically Animo and Geo since you don't have to worry about applying either element. With that in mind, he has a very similar team to Klee, himself, Bennett for obvious reasons, Kazuha for crowd control and Fire Shred with Viridis and Venerer, and Zhongli for safety or Xiangling for more damage. Based on the numbers people have calculated, he seems to be on par with Yoimiya or slightly worse than her, but in his defense, Yoimiya is a candidate for double Hydro. Not bad considering he doesn't make use of reactions. That's why I'm happy to see him the way he is. Elemental reactions provide so much extra damage that more often than not, a team that makes use of them will always be stronger than a team that doesn't. The only way to circumvent this is to add built-in supplementation for teams that forego them. A video I made a long time ago was the idea of adding more elemental resonance bonuses for 3 or 4 members of the same element. They didn't implement them on a global scale, but they're starting to instate them locally in units like Goro and Lyney, who are pretty much elemental resonance on a character. Only in this case, Lyney is the main damage dealer, the first one too, so we can finally take a look at how mono-elemental playstyles would pan out if it were on a 5-star on-fielder. Moreover, Lyney is a hypercarry, and a big challenge with hypercarries is the need for extended field time plus the concentration of damage being focused on them, so they need more stats than your conventional characters. Doubling the damage he can deal on pyro-effective targets is on a similar power scaling to Eula's inflated burst numbers, only this time it's on Pyro, which has access to benefits like bonus elemental damage. That's only accounting for his bases. They were nice enough to power his constellations with the same numbers too. Constellation 1 lets him have 2 decoy bombs at once and give him 2 stacks of prop surplus on a level 2 aim shot, doubling the damage from his Mulligan hats and cutting the stacking time of his elemental skill, which in turn doubles the front-loaded burst of it and the efficacy of his immediate healing. Imagine if it didn't have a 15-second cooldown, this would be broken as hell. Constellation 2 gives him up to 60% bonus crit damage after being on field for 6 seconds. For reference, Kujo Sada, the character known for supporting Electro Hypercarry, her final constellation is a 60% crit damage boost on Electro attacks, and you have to give up an entire party slot to get that. Lyney has a built-in Sada C6. By the way, for those who didn't notice, Lyney is the first character whose upgrade constellation, that being C3 and C5, upgrades his normal attack. Prior to version 4, every single unit C3 and C5 were for their elemental skill and burst or vice versa. This is the first normal attack upgrade, which changes everything. Imagine if Yoimiya had this instead of upgrading her worthless ultimate. Constellation 4 tacks on an extra 20% Fire Shred with practically infinite uptime, stacking with the 40% from Viridis and Venerer, and that amps up his damage even higher. As for his actual Constellation 6, it effectively doubles the damage of his level 2 aim shot, including 80% of the damage of a pyrotechnic strike per hit. This character is actually bull not gonna lie. If a normal unit had these numbers and reactions, they would straight up be top tier. That's the point though. He needs these numbers to be effective. Point for point, Lyney straight up solves two pressing concerns I had with the game's combat and characters at the same time. He does a significant amount of damage for someone who doesn't make use of amplifying reactions, allowing you to comfortably build a mono pyro team without feeling like you're being held back by design flaws. They were also aware of the fact that Lyney is meant to be played as a hyper carry who takes up a lot of field time through charge attacks, and balanced him to make up for the loss of DPS from quick swapping teams. Granted, I wouldn't go so far as to say he contests with Tao, but to repeat, for someone who doesn't make use of reactions, it's damn near enough to be competitive, and that's the important part. This sets a good precedent for how hyper carries and mono element focused units should be designed and balanced, which has me excited for the possibility of more niche teams and comps in the future. I don't pay too much attention to leaks, so maybe it's already in the works, but I'd love to see if any future units are also meta and niche at the same time. It's pretty long overdue considering we're at version 4 already, but better late than never. They already sort of laid the groundwork for mono element teams to be a thing. Cryo, for instance, already hints at wanting to have birds of a feather flocking together. Cryo resonance is extremely powerful. More cryo application means more consistent freeze time, and Shunhe provides a metric ton of buffs to cryo attacks. In all honesty, they can release the mono cryo 5-star DPS right now if they wanted to. The other elements might be more challenging though because they're so intimately connected with their respective reactions that trying to offset the cost might not be practically feasible. We do have sought out for the possibility of Electro Hypercarry, but Dendro and Hydro pretty much have a chokehold over the element that the idea of going mono Electro is too inefficient. Same goes for Hydro. With how many overpowered reactions it's affiliated with, Freeze, Electrocharge, Hyper Bloom, Vaporize, not to mention the roster containing lots of drivers and off-fielders make it the least likely to be a mono elemental team. I might be wrong on this. Have any child or Ayato mains gone triple Hydro with Xingchuan Yelan and found good numbers with it, or is it just too dependent on Vaporize? Anemo might work. I know in my Xiao video I said that Farazan didn't do very much to elevate him from his predicament, which in hindsight may have come off the wrong way. Farazan did help in propelling Xiao's viability as a strong hypercarry, but hypercarries in general were getting shafted pretty hard by reaction-centric teams, which is why I said Xiao didn't change the position all too much despite Farazan's addition, if that makes sense. Nevertheless, I don't know if mono anima would work, not in terms of executability, but it's just if they were to release an actual main DPS with an animo party stacking passive, Xiao and Wanderer would be screwed. Instead, they should go the route of adding another Farazan type support and stick with Xiao and Wanderer. Dendro, like Hydro, is also probably a no-go. While ludicrously powerful, it was explicitly designed to channel reactions, not as a mono elemental team. I guess you could make an argument for using spread for a mono Dendro hypercarry team though. Triple Dendro, 1 Electro just to set off Quicken, so maybe that's a possibility. That means besides Geo and Pyro, the other elements that can successfully have a mono elemental hypercarry team would be Cryo for sure and maybe Dendro. I would say Animo, but again releasing a mono Animo hypercarry unit would push Xiao and Wanderer out of business, assuming they're balanced to have the same privileges that Lyney does, so for them they should just give another support. I'm excited. This is a fantastic first impression of the kind of experimentation MiHoYo is doing with Fontaine, both in terms of exploration and gameplay. Assuming they plan to follow through with more inventive character designs and Lyney's not just a one-off, this might be what Genshin needs to restore player interest in the game. At the very least, I'm glad we finally have a good Pyro unit after all the terribleness of Zedia's situation. Not counting her, it's been over 2 years since we had a Pyro character, so this was very much needed. Anyways, I'm rambling on at this point, so we'll end things off here. All in all, Lyney has me very optimistic for what's to come, and I hope all Fontaine characters get the same thought and consideration for their designs. Again, I don't pay too much attention to leaks, so I'm living on a prayer here. And if you guys enjoyed the video, it would be great if you left a like and subscribed. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other discussion videos if you haven't yet. But for now, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon in the next one. Take care.